If there is one piece of advice that drives artists crazy, it's just practice. Well, I am drawing, I am practicing, but I'm not really seeing any improvement. The problem is no one explains what exactly you're supposed to practice. And I mean, it kind of makes sense, right? Draw more and you will get better. But the truth is, without the right approach, your progress can be super slow. So today I'm sharing 10 essential exercises from my art school days, and they're exactly what you need to practice to level up your drawing skills. And if you find this helpful, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe. It's easy for you, makes my day, and it helps my channel grow. Thank you so much for your support, guys, and let's get started. Alright, we're gonna start with the simplest, most basic stuff and slowly level things up. Some of this you've probably heard before, and yeah, they might seem kind of boring, but think of them as exercises to train your skills, not something you need to make perfect. These will help you improve different aspects of drawing, like color, rendering, composition, perspective, and much more. And the first, most fundamental exercise is all about lines. It doesn't matter if you're a beginner or already have some experience, this is something everyone should be doing, in my opinion. And it's not just about making your hands steadier, but also about improving the overall quality of your lines. This one is super simple and works great as a warm-up exercise before you start your actual drawing session. I'm gonna use my sketch brush for my rendering set, but you can use whatever brush you are comfortable with. The first thing I do is draw parallel straight lines, adding pressure in the middle. It helps with control and adjusting line thickness. You can change the angle, but try to keep the lines as consistent as possible. And after that, we're gonna do curves using the same idea. You can play around with different sizes and angles and try controlling your pencil pressure while keeping the lines as parallel as possible. And then I move on to drawing circles and ovals, making sure the start and end points connect. And honestly, even I don't always nail this perfectly. One big thing, try to use your whole arm while drawing, not just your wrist. If you only use your wrist, you're kind of limiting your range of motion, if that makes sense. And that makes things harder in the long run. Alright, the next exercise is all about training your sense of tone, which is honestly one of the most important skills in drawing. Without tone, there is no depth, no volume, and colors just end up looking off. And for this one, we're gonna practice tonal gradients on simple shapes like spheres, cubes, cylinders, and cones. You can find tons of good references on Pinterest, and I will link my Pinterest board in the description, so feel free to use it. So here's how I do it. I start with a quick sketch, nothing fancy, don't stress about making it perfect, and then I pick just 3 tones. And we're not using pure black and white, just something from this range. This one is the lightest, this one is the darkest. That way we always have some extra tones to add more depth. First I block in the shadow areas, then add the lightest parts. After that I take a mid-tone and fill in the half-tones. Back in art school, I hated drawing these cubes, cylinders, and spheres. It felt so boring to me, but at some point I kind of fell in love with it. To blend these 3 tones, I just grab the color in between with the eyedropper tool and lightly brush it in. Oh, and by the way, stick to simple brushes, no crazy textures or hard effects, just something basic like this one. And you don't need to spend hours on that. What matters is placing the tones correctly. And once this starts feeling easy, you can step it up by sketching compositions using simple objects. And if you're feeling like extra ambitious, try drawing planes of the head with different lighting setups. It's a game changer for improving your portrait shading. Okay, the next exercise is all about perspective and volume. We're gonna draw cubes, cylinders, and spheres from different angles and in different perspectives. And I see this all the time. Artists are eager to jump straight into drawing human figure, preferably in some super complex pose, but then they struggle, and the reason is pretty simple. They haven't built a solid understanding of volume and perspective yet. If you learn to draw and imagine basic forms like cubes and cylinders in space, everything else, like drawing people, becomes so much easier. So first, draw these objects using one-point perspective. It's where all the lines go to one spot, and then when you feel confident, add a second vanishing point. The key is to draw through the shapes, like they're transparent, if that makes sense, so you can understand how they sit in space. Also make the edges that are closer to you darker and the ones that are further away lighter and thinner. This helps make your drawings look more 3D. Once this starts feeling easy, like you can draw the shapes in different angles without even thinking, you can start making things more challenging. Try cutting pieces out of the shapes and combining them in different ways. This helps train your brain to think in 3D, which makes drawing literally everything so much easier. And there is also another simple way to practice volume. Just look around your desk and draw real objects using basic shapes. So instead of drawing a full object right away, break it down into simple shapes like cubes, cylinders, spheres, etc. and then refine it from there. Start with something easy like a cup or a glass, and then challenge yourself with the trickier objects, maybe a teapot, a camera, or even a game controller. The more you do this, the better you will get at seeing and building forms in 3D, which is a huge step in improving your drawings. Alright, let's move on to the next exercise, and it's all about color. The idea is pretty simple. Pick an image you like, it can be a photo, a painting, it doesn't really matter. Then use the eyedropper tool to select a few different colors from it and create a mini palette. At this point, I just take a guess and try to find these colors by eye. So I start by picking a base color, in this case it's a pale greenish tone, and I just trying to figure out what adjustments it needs. Should it be warmer, cooler, brighter, darker, etc. It's definitely easier to work with highly saturated colors since it's more obvious which direction to go. But overall, I absolutely love this exercise. It's great for training your eye to see and understand colors better. Over time, it will help you create illustration with cleaner and more interesting colors. You will also start noticing things like hue, saturation, value, cool and warm tones, which are all super important skills when working with color. Alright, next up we've got a composition exercise, and trust me, this one is a must if you want to create dynamic and interesting illustrations. So here's what we're gonna do. Pick a piece from one of your favorite artists or photographers and try to choose something with good balance, movement, and strong framing. So instead of focusing on details, simplify it into simple shapes and guidelines. The goal is to identify the focal point, the guiding lines, and any supporting elements that help balance the composition. This exercise trains your composition skills by helping you see how artists direct the viewer's attention. And it also strengthens your ability to see the bigger picture, learning to break things down into structure and masses instead of getting lost in small details. And you can use these simplified layouts as inspiration for your own work, making your compositions feel stronger, more balanced, and more interesting. Next, we've got a rendering exercise, and honestly, I talk about this one all the time. The goal is to blend different colors manually without using the smudge tool. The process is pretty simple. Take a color in between the two you're blending and make a brush stroke, and then repeat until you get a smooth transition. The key is to follow the form of the object while blending. This makes the shape look even more realistic and dimensional. First, we start with simple color gradients and try to make them as smooth as possible. You can use different brushes for this, but avoid anything too hard, too soft, or overly textured. When I render a face, I apply my strokes in a specific way, kind of like this. You can try my approach, or you can study other artists and see how they do it. And this exercise doesn't just teach you smooth rendering, it also helps you build control when working with different brushes. Over time, it will give you more control and freedom to experiment with different rendering techniques, which will ultimately help you develop your own unique rendering style. Alright, let's keep going. This next exercise is not just about rendering, it's so much more than that. It's also about technique, stylization, and overall skill building. We're going to copy small sections of artworks from different artists. Depending on what you want to improve, you pick a piece of the artwork, maybe a section of hair or eyes or whatever, and try to replicate it. And of course, we can't always tell exactly how an artist achieved a certain effect, so a big part of this exercise is figuring it out as you go. It's not always easy, but luckily a lot of artists share their process in videos videos, so you can study those and apply what you learn. With this exercise, you can practice color, hatching, rendering different materials, and even stylization. And honestly, it's one of the best ways to level up fast. Okay, so why is it better than just copying full artworks? Well, because this method forces you to analyze techniques, values, color, etc. in a much deeper level. First of all, you will understand technical tricks better. When you focus on one small area like an eye or a fabric fold, you can really break it down. You start noticing how artists build depth, where they soften or sharpen edges, and how they transition colors smoothly. And over time, you will naturally start using these techniques in your own work. Second of all, you will spot your own mistakes faster. Maybe you copy the shadows from an artist's work and suddenly realize you've been placing your shadows all wrong. Or you copy lips and notice that you never added shadows in the corners before. The more you break down other artists' work, the better you will see what's often yours. And third, you will get better at stylization. When you copy the same element from different artists, you start to see how each of them simplifies or adds detail in their own way. One artist might paint hyper-realistic eyes, while another just draws a basic shape with a highlight. This helps you learn to choose what works for you instead of just blindly copying someone else's style. The important thing here is to analyze what are you copying, not just mindlessly repeat it. Try to understand why the artist made certain choices and how you can apply it to your own work. And if you do this at least once a week, I promise you will start seeing real improvements in just a month. Okay, let's move on to the next exercise, which is all about stylization. The idea here is to simplify an object, in this case a person's face, down to basic shapes and exaggerate certain features to make it look more expressive. Start by choosing a reference photo. Basically it can be anyone, but it helps if they have distinct facial features, since that makes the process easier. So instead of focusing on details, try to break their face down into simple shapes and forms. Think of it as creating a rough structure rather than a realistic portrait. Remember the composition exercise? So this is similar, but here we can use slightly more complex shapes. Look at the features that stand out to you the most. Maybe they have big expressive eyes, a sharp jawline, or a unique hairstyle. Whatever it is, simplify it as much as you can. No need for details, we're just creating a basic structure. Once that's done, we'll take a step further and push the exaggeration. Make the big eyes even bigger, emphasize the shape of the hair, sharpen or round out the face. The key is to keep everything balanced so it still looks harmonious. Okay, now comes the fun part. Once you have your stylized sketch, try drawing the person again using your simplified design as a base. This exercise helps train your eye to focus on what really matters instead of getting caught up in small details. You will start thinking in shapes instead of lines and explore different ways to simplify and exaggerate features. It's an amazing way to experiment with style and learn how to make your characters more expressive and unique. And finally, we've made it to anatomy exercises. Since anatomy is such a big and complex topic, I've got a few different exercises to help you break it down. And the first exercise is to draw simplified planes of facial features such as nose, lips, eyes, and ears. After that, you can move on to sketching the planes of the head, trying them from different angles and perspectives. Don't try to dive into everything at once. Take it step by step. Think of it like eating an elephant. Take one bite at a time. This exercise will help you see volume instead of just contours, if that makes sense. Instead of focusing on outlines, you will understand how these forms exist in space. Once you feel comfortable with that, start doing analytical sketches of facial features. The goal isn't to memorize every single muscle and bone, but to understand the structure and masses. A good way to do this is by drawing over a reference, breaking it down into simple forms. You can even use color to highlight different areas, which makes it easier to separate the elements. Then take what you've learned and try sketching those forms from scratch using your studies as a base. Another super useful exercise is quick gesture sketches, 30 seconds to 1 minute per pose. It's not the easiest thing at first, but trust me, it has so many benefits. First, it forces you to focus on the most important aspects instead of getting caught up in tiny details. You start seeing the pose, flow, and structure much faster. Over time, this builds visual memory, making it easier to capture proportion and movement without overthinking. Another big advantage is that it helps you loosen up and add more life to your drawings. And the best part, it's a great way to overcome perfectionism. I mean, when you only have 30 seconds, there's just no time to overthink. You have to commit to the lines and move on. And yeah, these exercises might feel tricky at first, but if you stick with them, I promise you will see huge improvements in your anatomy skills pretty quickly. Okay, we've talked about exercises, and by now you probably have tons of different questions in your head, like how often should I practice them? For how long? When will I see results? So let's go through everything step by step, and I will give you some advice on how to practice these exercises effectively to see results as fast as possible. And first, start with the simplest exercises. Even if you think you've already mastered volume, lines, and perspective, I highly recommend starting with these, especially if you're still developing your skills. And you don't have to spend hours on them. 20-50 minutes per session is already great. If you can do them every day, amazing, but realistically, every other day is already a solid habit. And don't do all of these exercises in one day or even in a month. The best approach is to create a plan that allows you to balance your practice so you can steadily improve your key skills without feeling overwhelmed. Limit yourself to about 3-5 exercises per month. This way you can focus on real progress instead of constantly switching between tasks. Next month, you can add something new if you have time or replace one exercise with another. Keep track of your progress and adjust your plan based on what works best for you. Choose 1 to 3 exercises per session. For example, you could do a quick line warm-up, a color exercise, and some perspective studies, which would take about 20-40 minutes. Or let's say you're struggling with color, so spend the whole session on that. Focus on what challenged you the most. If some exercise feels too frustrating, switch on something easier and come back to it later. Progress should be steady, not exhausting. Always warm up before your main drawing session. Even 10-15 minutes of lines or quick sketches before jumping into complex work can make a huge difference. If you're wondering how often you should practice, a good starting point is 3-4 times a week for 20-60 minutes. If you want to improve faster, aim for 5-6 sessions a week, but don't overwork yourself. Rest is just as important for progress. And now let's talk results, because I know that's what you're really waiting for. Obviously, improvement doesn't happen overnight, but if you practice consistently, you will start seeing first changes in about a month. The key is not obsessing over immediate results. That's one of the biggest motivation killers. What really matters is analyzing your progress. What's improving, what still needs work, and what exercises you might want to add to your routine. And please don't try to make everything perfect. These are exercises, not finished pieces. The goal is to train specific skills and not create a masterpiece. So I hope you guys now have a clear idea what exactly you need to practice to finally improve your drawing skills. Let me know in the comments what topics you would like me to cover in future videos. I read all of them. And of course, if you haven't already, hit that like button, subscribe to my channel, and I will see you very soon in the next video. Bye guys!